What if the fire never touched me? I remember the heat. It shimmered all around me, dancing across the lava like death given breath. But in this version of my life, I never fell. I never screamed. The ground didn't betray me. I stood on the edge of that burning river, seething with hatred, eyes locked on Obi-Wan. My limbs were intact, my skin wasn't charred, and most of all, my rage remained unmuted, untempered by pain. They say, pain breaks you, humbles you. But I was never humbled. I never wore the armor. I never needed the machine to breathe for me. The Force moved through my lungs like wildfire, pure and uncontaminated, and with it, I rebuilt everything. The galaxy never saw Darth Vader as a symbol of fear hidden behind a mask. Number, they saw me, Anakin Skywalker, eyes yellow with power, voice sharp and unfiltered. The Jedi called me a monster. I made sure they were right. But I think back sometimes. Would Padme have survived if she saw me whole? If she hadn't seen the blackened husk, but instead the man she once loved, standing tall, alive, commanding entire fleets with a flick of his fingers? Would the twins have been hidden if I'd never needed to hide? If the Emperor hadn't needed to cage me in steel, but had simply watched as I became the prophecy fulfilled, no longer balance, but domination? Without the suit, I wasn't slowed. I didn't need to meditate in a tank just to function. My connection to the Force wasn't dulled by circuitry or synthetic limbs. I felt everything, every betrayal, every fear, every death as if it were mine. I was more than Sith, more than Jedi. I was the storm they warned about in whispers, and I could be everywhere. But here's the truth no one talks about. The fire might have saved me, not in a heroic way, in a human way, because without it I became untouchable, more machine in mind than I ever could have been in body. There was no pain to ground me, no weakness to remind me I was still a man. I didn't burn, and because of that the galaxy did. I stood atop the wreckage of Coruscant's last resistance, not in a mask, not in a cloak, but in the robes of a fallen Jedi, burnt at the edges not by fire but by choice. I wanted them to see my face when I broke them. I wanted them to remember it. I walked through the ruins of the temple, the halls where I once trained, where children once smiled up at me. Their voices haunted me, sure, but they never stopped me. Without the scars, without the suit, the world saw a young man, handsome, whole, almost tragic. That was my greatest weapon, because who would suspect that this was the face of genocide? I reached planets faster, fought longer, strategized sharper. Without cybernetics, my reflexes stayed Jedi fast, but my choices were entirely Sith. I didn't have to wait in meditation chambers or rely on Bacta tanks. I was mobile, lethal, alive, and yet I felt nothing. No love, no remorse, no thrill. The Force was a storm inside me, and I stood at its eye, calm, powerful, detached. Padme's death didn't tear at me the way it might have if I'd been broken. Instead, it confirmed something I hadn't dared to admit. The old Anakin had died before Mustafar. The fire never got the chance to kill me, because I had already killed myself. Still, there were moments, fleeting ones, when I saw my reflection in the polished steel of a Star Destroyer, or caught a glimpse of a holo recording of Obi-Wan, or felt a tremor in the Force that sounded too much like her. And for a second, just a second, I wondered, was the fire meant to stop me? Was it the will of the Force that I burn, so the galaxy might live? But I didn't. I survived untouched, and because of that, the future reshaped itself around my shadow. The Empire was built not just on fear, but on belief. They believed in me, in the legend of a Jedi who fell and never broke. Rebellions didn't spark. Hope didn't rise. The whispers of Luke and Leia were just that, whispers, buried in forgotten corners of space. What if I didn't burn? Then the fire spread. Everywhere else. Years passed, and still, I remained unchanged. Time could not rot what fire never touched. While others aged, I stood in the heart of my empire, untouched by the consequences of mortality. The same hands that once held a lightsaber in defense of peace now clenched the throats of dissenters across star systems. They called it strength. I called it justice. But at night, when the stars outside my chamber stretched like old scars across the void, I would close my eyes and hear them, not the screams of my enemies. Number, the laughter of a boy on Tatooine, dreaming of freedom, the sound of Padme's voice saying my name, softly before it ever sounded like a curse, the whispers of my mother's last breath as I cradled her, helpless. The strange thing about surviving intact is that you carry everything with you, every failure, every sin, every what if. When you burn, at least some of it dies with you. But me? I remembered everything. The Council's mistrust, Obi-Wan's heartbreak, 1,000 chances to turn back, and I chose power, over and over again. The Emperor underestimated what I'd become. He thought he'd gain a servant with none of the weakness. Instead, he forged something worse. I didn't kneel. I watched him closely, learned, waited, and when the time came, I struck. There was no redemption, no last-minute plea, no Vader returning to the light. I killed him because he stood between me and eternity. And I took his place. The galaxy didn't cheer. It obeyed. They built statues, rewrote history, raised their children to fear and admire the name Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one, not for balance, but for order. Still, I wonder, would Luke have reached me if I had burned? Would his hand in mine have reminded me of the flesh I'd lost, the humanity I once had? Without that pain, without the slow, suffocating reminder of what I gave up, was I ever reachable? Maybe that's the tragedy, not that I lived, but that I lived fully, and chose darkness anyway. So when they ask, what if Anakin didn't burn? I tell them, then no one could save him, not from the galaxy, and not from himself. And now I ask you, what do you believe? Was the fire meant to destroy me, or to save what little of Anakin was left? In a galaxy shaped by choice and consequence, where one decision can echo across generations, we're all one step away from becoming something else. So if you were standing on the edge like I once did, what would you choose? If this story made you feel something, think differently, then join me. Subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and let's explore the untold truths of the Star Wars universe together. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that almost happen.